this is a panel that I'm so excited to have because in one of my previous beauty incarnations, I owned I guess I still own it, but it's not really in business anymore, a niche fragrance brand called Haute in New York, and we launched it with Bettina we launched it with Bettina at Barney's, also like another lifetime ago. So I think what's been happening in the fragrance market has been something that I've been following, because in other categories that we're seeing this much growth, you would have seen investors flocking into it, and we haven't seen that. It's interesting now that there have been a couple checks written, more people are getting interested, so I think there's a lot of dynamics at play. And I wanted to put a panel together that would take us back to sort of historically how we got here. What are some of the dynamics that make fragrance different than other categories? And then also what's happening in China. So we have 3 Chinese brands on our Future 50 list. Documents is one of them. And really get from sort of, a brand in the market, what makes the market tick. So we only have 30 minutes. I'm going to do my best to cover all of this. But we have Bettina O'Neill, SVP of Business Development and Merchandising and Wholesale at Scentbird. We have Yuyi Ling, co-founder of Documents, and also Harry Richards, investment director at Manzanita. So I am going to dive right in. And Bettina, I want to start with you and kind of take a historical perspective, because when contemplating this, I think how we got here is important, because fragrance brands don't scale quickly. The category has always had small fragrance houses, but I think, and they're driven by creatives usually, that may or may not be good business people. But there was sort of this ground zero moment, if you will, in niche fragrance that happened at Barney's, and you launched Frederic Malle, Le Labo, Byredo, and so many other ones. Like literally, you were their first door. Can you share a little bit about sort of, and I think that that's sort of when fragrance started to change, but how it shifted the category and sort of the foundation that it created for where we are today?
Absolutely. And thank you for having me, and definitely had a great journey with you.
Yes, we have.
And I will tell you, many of my family members still ask me for Odin fragrances.
I think I have a few bottles left in storage.
Let's try something else. We have something else, but yes, they love it. Yeah, it was a wonderful time at Barney's. It was really amazing looking back on it and launching really the niche fragrance category. I started in Barney's about 2000. And at the time, I think our niche, our biggest brands were Creed, L'Artisan Parfumer, and also Nicotal. And looking at that was like, this is our biggest business. Let's focus on those. And so when Frederic Malle launched in Paris, I think it was 2001, we were like, oh, we have to have this brand. And I think we courted him for a year until he joined us. And what we did was we kind of recreated his shop. So I think it was about the experience. I know people were talking about the experience in the store to recreate that. And then the other key thing that was brilliant with Frederic is that he gave recognition to the perfumers that no one had ever spoken about before. Yep. The fact that he had them on the bottle, he had photos in his shop, he really made a tribute to them. And the other thing that we thought a bit about, but he was always right, was the pricing. Because all of a sudden, his fragrances were well over $200, and nothing was that high. Yeah. And he made the price based upon the ingredients as well. And I was like, you can't have the same size with different pricing. And I say this: the best founders are the ones who are unreasonable. They're like, and I say that with love, because they're the ones who are like, I have a vision, and this is what I believe, and they stick to it. So kudos to him. And then also he had the cabines, those smelling cabines, which was a whole new experience to experience fragrance. So I think that was really the real start. And then you'd mentioned Le Labo, which actually Frederic was the one who said they opened a shop in Nolita, go check them out. And loved Fabrice and Eddie, and we recreated that whole experience in Barney's, which was challenging but fun. And I think it was the fact that it was customizable, but not like it wasn't like, because I've had several brands where you were making blending in the store, and no one liked it, and they wanted to return. It was so this was like, oh, it's already blended. Put a label on it, you can't return it. So this, it worked out well. And then lastly, you're saying Byredo. And Ben, you know, he was a basketball player, he was more of an architect, and he had a vision. He had these, 4 fragrances and beautiful Scandinavian aesthetic. And I think they were just all stood out.
Yep.
And I think it's about the person having the real passion and not compromising.
Yeah. You know, no category is easy, but I would argue fragrance is probably one of the most nuanced because it's heavily reliant on storytelling and marketing. It's completely subjective. You've got slow replenishment. And these brands have historically not scaled quickly, but we've seen some massive exits recently. Even the category has witnessed this historic growth, there really hasn't been many investors playing in the space except Manzanita. So we're very grateful to have Manzanita on the panel. You know, Harry, I'm sure I can't think of another investor that's as deeply immersed in niche fragrance as you guys are. You acquired Diptyque in 2005. Still in your portfolio, took a majority stake in Byredo in 2013 and held it until selling a majority in 2022. And you recently made an investment in Dias & Durga. So I don't know anyone probably that knows this category better than you guys. How have you seen the category change? And do you think we're going to finally see more investment flow into fragrance? I mean, we already have, but it's a tough category.
It is a tough category. I think Bettina touched on one of the big shifts is the distribution landscape has shifted, you know, fairly dramatically even over the last 20 years. I mean, the challenges with the department store model are kind of well documented. Online and social media, you know, I don't think have been as big a boon to fragrance as to other categories, but it's certainly impacted it. And I think we're starting to see specialty retail as well. So I think the distribution landscape shift is one notable one. I mean, clearly, without wanting to state the obvious, with the era of discovery, the rise of niche fragrance brands has probably been the biggest impact. You know, Penhaligon's is, you know, a 19th century brand, but the last 20 years have seen this explosion in niche fragrance brands that are taking up a larger and larger share of the category, particularly at the prestige end. I think from a product perspective, there's also been some notable differences and changes over the years. I think you know, most brand offerings now are unisex. I think EDP is now the concentration of choice. And I think in terms of sizes and formats, everything from roll-ons to fragrance oils, travel sprays, even powdered perfume and solid perfumes now are big. And I think interlinked with that is the kind of shifts in consumer preferences. You know, gone are the days where you had one fragrance on the dresser and that was what you wore all the time and that was your scent. Now people have a scent wardrobe. They have different fragrances for different occasions, different moods, different times of year. And even for the growing minority, you know, they like to layer fragrances. So I think how customers interact with fragrance has changed. I think naturality and natural is probably another kind of product element that's interesting to explore and has definitely shifted. I have some reservations about whether it will have as big an impact in fragrance as it's had in other categories, but it's definitely more and more part of the conversation now. From the investment perspective, I'd challenge the premise slightly. I mean, I think there's been a lot of strategic acquisitions over the years from Estee Lauder and Jo Malone.
I'm talking early stage.
Hey, you know, Le Labo was 10 million.
Yeah.
Kilian was 15.
That's true. They traded much smaller.
They traded smaller and for big multiples, and I think that's happened, you know, relatively consistently. I think, you know, clearly recently you've seen some of those larger transactions, but I think you're right. There's definitely more early stage activity now, and I think that's a consequence of brands being able to get to that $5, $10, $15 million mark that where you find investors, you know, really interested, and clearly the kind of category tailwinds and a few blockbuster transactions do an awful lot to energize the space.
Yeah. Documents is representative of this innovative niche fragrance sort of movement that's happening in China. And China and the brands are getting a lot of interest from investors. But also, I think it is also representative of the Chinese consumers' like newfound love for niche fragrance. Can you share a little bit about what you're building with Documents? Because I don't know how many people are familiar with the brand, and also how Sea Beauty fragrance brands differ from maybe Western brands.
Yeah, okay. The greatest advantage of Documents is like we are like more familiar with the customer itself. So at the very beginning of our brand, we decided to like open up a flag shop directly in Shanghai to get access to our real customer face to face. So in this case, we can update our database of the product expectation and also to upgrade our store experience also. And also, this is also the reason why we define our brand separate as bold and zen, like in 残酷 in Chinese, because we are feeling like those kind of things is representative of the style of the younger generation of China, who is like brave to try anything, and they want to show them personality, inclusive about like the individual difference, but at the meantime, they have like their firmness and always chasing for the individual inside value and inside calm. This is also for the brand name, as name Documents. It's like we want our customer to be scented and to be memorized. Yeah, and also since we are like the Chinese perfume company, so we are always like trying to translate the Chinese traditional culture in a contemporary and attractive way. So yeah, it's like the little bit difference between like the domestic perfume brand and the international one. And also domestically, we have like some competitors in the perfume field, but we feel like the biggest scale is still in the mass market right now. Even the market, the supply chain, consumer is like mature right now. We think it's because of lack of the creative production and creative content, which we are really good at. And with the help of our investment company like L'Oreal and Chapeau, we are able to enlarge and enhance our brand reputation and influence of the brand we create, like luckily. Yeah.
Yeah. Bettina, at Scentford, you have access to a lot of consumer data just by sort of the virtue of your business. I think and the U.S. market is not a big fragrance market. We don't have the distribution channels that they have in Europe. So what is driving this Gen Z and I guess millennial consumer? I mean, we read about them. Even the New York Times is talking about how young boys on TikTok are all about fragrance all of a sudden. But I would, what is driving this consumer?
Well, you mentioned TikTok, and that is absolutely it's tremendous, and definitely for the Gen Z, but also the Alpha as well. It's kind of amazing hearing these boys wanting parfums to Marley. They're gonna put their money into that, which sounds crazy, but that really is really trending. And even my son, who's 20, when I was asking something, and his source of truth is YouTube or TikTok. Like anything else, no. So that's truly what everyone's looking at. And I would say whatever their influencer would be is what really is making that happen. I mean, as far as fragrance trends themselves have been interesting. Definitely gourmand, big moment. I mean, vanilla and then beyond with cherry and every type of apricot, peach. Also other interesting things. But then the other interesting part is that fragrance, they're going from extremes. They're going from skin scents or hair and body mist. That's crazy on fire. But then it goes to the other extreme of the beast mode oud. So to have that all in the same time period, to be like trending and everyone liking all things is really very interesting. Because as you were saying before, people don't have a signature scent. They want a variety, and they want to try. They want to change their fragrance 3 times a day, and they want lots of samples, and they're not interested in the 100 ml. Where back when I was a merchant, that was what you bought. But they want lots of different options. I mean, probably the biggest they want is like 30 ml, but they'd prefer lots of travel and just keep buying more and more.
Interesting. Harry, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the reality of some of the complexities of what it takes to scale a fragrance brand. Because today it's not uncommon for startups that check all the boxes in other categories to scale to 100 million plus in 3 to 5 years, which still kind of makes my head spin. And sometimes even faster than that. And while these might be anomalies, they happen with some frequency. But the dynamics of the fragrance category sort of impede that kind of scale. You can get there eventually, but it doesn't, I haven't heard of anyone do it in 3 to 5 years yet.
Nor me. I think it's distribution. We've touched on it a few times. I think the US and possibly China are probably the only two markets where you can build like $100 million brand in 3 to 5 years, full stop. And in the US, you really need Sephora or Ulta to help you do that. And today, fragrance is still a relatively small part of their business. I think they're still figuring out how you sell niche perfume brands in the space. I mean, I think the other channel where brands have been able to scale at that pace is obviously online, and fragrance, for very obvious reasons, is a more challenging category to sell online. I think TikTok and social media are starting to have more of an impact, but it's definitely not seen the same impact it has in skincare and makeup, where before and afters, clinicals, you can clearly visualize exactly what you're getting. And I think that extends, you can't acquire new customers directly. It's really, really difficult. Discovery sets and how people play with those and replenish and transfer to full size is definitely improving. So I think there's a chance that the category maybe can get to that stage at some point for a select number of brands, but it's still very, very challenging. And I think we've touched on it. It's an emotional category. It's a very personal category. There are nuances and challenges to marketing in the space that you need to build a brand universe and engage and connect with customers, and it's hard to do that in a short period of time.
We also talked about it in our prep call, and I think I had forgotten about it. I think I had PTSD, but that you really have to, it requires distributors.
Certainly
And
at the early stage,
that makes things move more slowly in many cases, and it also takes a lot of the control out of the brand's hands.
And a decent chunk of margin.
And it takes a huge chunk of margin.
Yeah. Yeah, international is so important, though, I think. And obviously, with each new market comes new risk, and you need people with international experience, and it's different skill sets, and operating with the distributors, but maintaining control of the brand as far as possible, and more lawyers. It's challenging.
Yeah, because it really is, to get to that $100 million, it requires an international footprint.
Yeah.
And heavily sort of a European footprint, which is a fragmented market to begin with.
Very fragmented market, country by country, perfumeries, etc. And obviously the Middle East is another huge fragrance market, pretty much dominated by a handful of distributors as well. So, and they're looking for brands with scale and recognition and awareness in other markets to bring in. And increasingly now you're competing against the sort of homegrown Middle Eastern brands, the Amouages of the world. So it's a challenge everywhere you go.
Yeah. Maybe a lot of people think of China, and we talked about this in the other panel, as sort of an online market. But Documents has, how many stores do you have? You have a number of branded stores where you're really controlling the experience.
Yeah.
Like, what is the relationship between online and offline for you?
Actually, online and offline, the business model, the focus, and the consumer behavior is like totally different. Like at the very first 3 years, we open up like impressive flag shops in like 11. We have like 11.
If you guys haven't seen their stores, they are breathtaking.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Actually, we're gonna design all the flag shop. Depends on the local culture, so it's all different, but all have like a welcome design, and we feel like that like the offline store is like more solid foundation for the business, because in China the online business you have like lots of like mature way to follow up, which we now relied on our investment company Ushapo, who is very professional at like online business, but we are focused more about like the offline things to like have the private traffic operation. Like this year we started lots of like workshops and events to like active the potential consumer, so that we will have like the solid and sustainable business. And for the business, the online business side, we rely on the professional investment company, and also we are trying to negotiate with more like region area, like distributors from like America, Canada, Dubai, those kind of things. We are trying to spread our business inside and outside of China. So if like anyone is interested in it, please like come to me. It's okay.
Bettina, I want to talk a little bit of the U.S. market specifically, because fragrance is not the leading market for fragrance, and we don't have the perfumeries. The department stores are sort of not what they were, and Sephora is sort of filling the gap, but I don't know that it's the discovery. I think there's a different kind of fragrances, and there's fragrance happening there, but it's not sort of these very small brands. And I think you understand the path to purchase probably better than anyone, especially now that you're immersed in online. But I saw a statistist said that 773 million global consumers purchase on e-commerce platforms for fragrance, which I thought was high, and that colognes are a quarter of all the fragrance sales made online to $3 billion. And my question is that replenishment? Are people really taking a dive and making a purchase based on like what someone says in TikTok? Or are they going in store and then the replenishment is happening online?
From our experience on Scentbird, which we have 700,000 subscribers for the US and Canada, because we also do surveys and get all the information, but they do replenish. Like if they already know they like fragrance, the ease of it, they don't have to go in the store. And I think obviously since the pandemic too, it became just everyone's go-to, and it's very convenient. And I think the part with the sampling, it's always been a challenge from fragrance. If you're not in the store, and then obviously there was the challenge of traffic and all that, and then there were restrictions for sampling. But I think customers, they will try discovery kits, which I know we sell so many discovery kits, and they will try lots of different options. And then I think once they love something, they'll get a slightly bigger size, but they always want to keep trying. So I think it's definitely a combination. And I think like with the subscription for like Scentbird, it's an 8 ml, it's a decent size. So if someone doesn't love what they have, I mean, they may not write a great review on it, but they're not going to like, oh my God, broke the bank on $16.95. So it's a different experience. So I think that's where, for myself with Scentbird, not to be a shameless plug, but I really see how that really is that smart sampling, where someone is like choosing a sample, they're paying for a sample. When they receive the sample, we follow up and encourage a rating and review. We then go back and retarget to the brand's D2C or retailer of choice. So we're making it kind of easy, and we don't lose track of the customer or the sample.
Harry, one last question for you, and then we'll open it up to a couple questions. But anytime a category sees a tremendous amount of growth and investors start writing checks, we start seeing more and more brands launch in the category. It's sort of the circle of beauty life. What advice can you give to either people thinking about launching a fragrance brand or people who have already made that step into like what a winning distribution strategy looks like? Because it really does come down to the distribution mix. Like, what does it look like to scale a niche fragrance brand, and where should you start? Not to put you on the spot.
I think clearly this will depend on the price point and the positioning of the brand, but I think clearly you want, like any category, a strong share of direct-to-consumer revenue. I mean, that will predominantly start online, but I think as documents has shown, four-wall retail, the margins of fragrance, particularly prestige fragrance, do allow that flexibility where four-wall retail is an option, and I think an amazing opportunity to really express the brand universe and tell the story, which I think is so important with an emotional category like fragrance. Clearly, key wholesale partners, whether that's, grocery at mass or specialty retail or department stores in luxury, do serve a purpose, potentially not the same level of scale they had before, but they help with brand positioning, and they will drive volume and awareness. I think with wholesale, my recommendation would always be go narrow and deep. I think being with multiple people and doing small amounts of business is less less beneficial and ultimately, less successful in the long term than focusing on a few key partners and really investing behind them, understanding the customer, getting the marketing, the VM, the presentation right. And then international, as we've touched on, I think that provides an incredible angle. And I think fragrance is one of those categories where you can play internationally earlier. And whether that's through distributors or at a push agents, or if you have the money to take the risk through a directly operated subsidiary, because brands need international to scale and go the full distance in fragrance, and having those proof points that show that your brand story resonates with a global audience, I think is crucial if you want to build a meaningful long-term brand.
Yeah, and patience.
And patience helps.
Yes.
So I want to open it up to a couple questions. Sarah Colton, of course.
I can talk loud.
I know. We're gonna get you a mic. It's coming.
My question is,
Wait, your mic is coming, Sarah. You forgot about that.
patience. Yes. I have a question. Well, actually, Bettina and Harry, you have both spoken, and I don't remember if you spoke about this, but I was recently in San Francisco at ZGO, and I was with Sebastian Jarre, the perfume guy, and they were both saying to me that they have this huge majority, like Sebastian was saying, like 75% of the people that follow him are men, and many of them are these like 15-year-old boys. And at ZGO, they were saying 15-year-old boys come in here all the time, and they get their parents or somebody to put up 500 euros or dollars or whatever it is to buy these fragrances. And so you've both mentioned this. Where are these 15-year-old girls? Are they anywhere? Or I'm just curious because I'm curious. What do you think?
You want to take that one, Harry?
Sol de Janeiro.
Sol de Janeiro, yeah.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say, I think they've always been there. I mean, I think it's just a phenomenon that the boys are now involved. But I think the girls have always been, already, I guess we'll say, ahead of the game in the fragrance category. But definitely the hair and body mist, but then they also definitely like the luxury as well. So I think it's really, and obviously following their influencer. Definitely no one's following their mom or don't want anything to do with what they're wearing. But I think they're definitely there.
It was a couple years ago, I was in Selfridges, and the buyers had moved fragrance, Creed, Tom Ford, up next to the $1,000 sneakers. And I was like, this is brilliant. And it made so much sense. So I think it has been there, but we weren't really servicing them, maybe.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. That was an easy switch over. But we've seen that France has been always king of perfumes for as long as we can remember. But now the target is kind of switching. Now Western brands are having a bit more of a say. And now East Asian brands are having a lot more of a say. I'm really fascinated by documents. I want you to come to the US. How are you?
we were trying to find an opportunity to come.
So with this kind of switch in perspective, how are you taking advantage of not only local customers going back to East Asian fragrances, but also international customers seeking them out now?
Actually, for us, like the perfume company, to go outside of China and outside of Asia is really an adventure, and like we need to have like lots of efforts to go outside of China because of the policy and the delivery and the manufacturing things. But we are trying to find a way. Like earlier this year, we went to Dubai for Dubai, like the supportive, and we see lots of the distributor in Dubai also. And this time we came to US, thanks for the BeautyMatter's invitation, and we met lots of distributors here. So we're gonna negotiate a little bit with the regional area distributor, as I said before, so that we can thanks to their help to help our brand to go outside of China. And we are planning to, because we want to increase the volume of the brand itself, and the documents, like the name is kind of international. Yeah, so yeah, we will see.
I have
Okay.
one question. I'm back here.
Yes, we have one more question.
Hi, I'm Kata, the founder of Our Side of Fragrance Brand, so I was very excited for this panel. My question is for you, Harry. So when you think about the world of fragrance brands, obviously you must be tracking a ton, but if you pique your interest, what is it that in a crowded category piques your interest, and then maybe what is it that takes you to take that next step once a brand is ready for some sort of growth investment? What metrics are most important to you that you've seen kind of time and time again indicate maybe success? Thank you.
There's a few things there to unpack. I mean, I think obviously product and team and founder is obviously very important, but I don't know if the world needs another patchouli fragrance, honestly. I think you need to have a really unique point of view. Like with any category, I'm not sure fragrance is particularly unique in that perspective, but I think you need a clear point of differentiation, a reason for people to come and explore your brand and learn more and buy into the universe and ultimately the product. I think metrics that we would look for is not just the ability to drive customers to try, but the ability to bring them back again and again. It's the holy grail of beauty, and harder with fragrance. We've talked about it. It's not a huge fast replenishment category, but being able to bring customers back in, whether that's through home fragrance or body care products, or just keep them engaged and in the universe, I think is kind of key for us when we're looking at brands we think will stand the test of time. Happy to go into more detail afterwards.
Okay, I think I would love to continue talking. I'm obsessed with like what's happening with this category, so it'll be fun to sort of watch it play out in the next couple years. But thank you all for having this conversation with us.